Hi there, this is Don Ross for JamPlay.com. I'd like to talk a little bit about altered tunings versus open tunings. Now this is a big subject, and I'll try not to get too big with it, but altered tunings are the more kind of big category. So if you imagine altered tunings being any tuning that isn't standard tuning. Now, for example, I just played a little snippet of something in what's called drop D tuning. Drop D tuning is a really, really popular altered tuning, but it's not what we would call an open tuning. That's something else. Altered tuning is simply where we change at least one of the strings from standard tuning. So for example, if I were back in standard tuning, okay, E, A, D, G, B, E. All right, there's millions of pieces of guitar music that have been written in standard tuning, and there's nothing wrong with standard tuning. It's an old buddy of mine. I go back to it on a regular basis. So there's nothing inferior about standard tuning. It's just it was a big compromise that we came to eventually. Standard tuning, the bottom four strings are essentially the same tuning as an upright bass, right? But an octave higher. So E, A, D, G is how you tune an upright bass, or by extension a bass guitar, which is a more recent invention. Uses the exact same tuning in the same octave as an upright bass. So the guitar kind of borrows that tuning and adds two more strings. Okay. And in order for the pitch classes on the two outside strings to both be the letter E, we compromised a little bit. All of these intervals are the same. That set of intervals there from this note E to A is what's called a fourth. E, F, G, A. It's four-letter names away. So that's a fourth. We go up another fourth from A, B, C, D. We get D. Up another fourth from D, D, E, F, G. Right? And this is where we sort of fudged it a little bit. We go from G to B. That's what's called a major third. And then we go back to a fourth again from B to E. Right? So it's a funny compromisey kind of tuning that evolved over time. It sort of came from an earlier tuning for an instrument called the vihuela, which was kind of an ancestor of the guitar, which was usually tuned like this, with an F sharp on the third string. So it's almost the same tuning, but the third is here instead of where it is in the guitar. So that's all kind of very cursory background to standard tuning. But the thing about standard tuning is that it's capable of all kinds of things, and of course we've got a huge worldwide repertoire in this tuning, but then it has a lot of limitations. So one of the limitations is its range. So one of the things that we've done to increase the range is to change the tuning a little bit. And that drop D tuning, as it's called, is a really great example. Because normally a D chord really only sounds solid, like a real D chord, if you play only the top four strings. That's not much of the range of the guitar. You're leaving out the bottom two strings. So the great idea somebody had, somebody somewhere had a eureka moment and tune the bottom string from an E down to a D, so an octave lower than your D string. And just by doing that, you are now capable of playing all six strings when you fingered the same D chord. Beautiful. What a great sound. So the drop D tuning is a prime example of an altered tuning. By altered, I mean that it's not what we would call an open tuning, which I'll explain in a second. When I play this, that isn't really what you would call an easy to identify chord. It's just standard tuning with a D on the bottom. But then it makes all the D chords just sound so glorious. Right? That extra bottom range in it. Here's a nice D chord. Ooh. Anyway, sounds fantastic in this altered tuning. So that's an example of altering your tuning. When I was a kid, I started playing guitar when I was about 8 years old. Now, I'm old enough to remember the folk scare from back in the day. And at that time, there were 400,000 songs that everybody was playing, whether they were protest songs or religious songs or whatever, that all kind of went like this. Had the same 4 chords in them. Unlike all the pop songs now, which have the same 4 chords in a different order. It's like 400,000 songs with that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Now, what I found as a little guy with not very big hands is when I went to play, I mean, aside from the fact that it had the dreaded F chord in it, C, A minor, and F, for those 3 chords, I had this finger being pressed down on a second string all the time. And my little hands would get really, really sore and tired. So I had this bright idea one day, well, why don't I just tune that string to this note? Now you have to understand I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what the names of the notes were or anything. But I thought, that chord, and that chord, and that chord all have that in them. Why don't I just tune that string to that? So, et voila. I had a tuning that let the C chord be this much easier to play. The A minor, very nice. The F, whatever, however you want to finger it. The only chord that was a bit weird was the G. But it's kind of pretty as well. So it's called an 11th chord. It's the crowded house G chord. Anyway, don't dream it's over. So that was my first example of an altered tuning from my childhood. And the reason why I used it was because it made something easier. And that's still, to this day, I mean, I use hundreds of tunings now. It's kind of ridiculous. But still, when I do a retuning on my guitar, it's to make something easier. That's why. Usually to free up some room in my left hand. And to make other things possible that are just simply impossible in standard guitar tuning. So that's like the big picture of altered tunings. We'll get more specifically to open tunings in another lesson here on JamPlay, so I'll see you then.